Thank you and welcome to Be Wise, everybody. We are now online with wonderful guest speakers, myself, Kata, and a very great opportunity to share some information with regards to these changing times and how they're affecting our jobs, our careers, our state of mind when it comes to how to put food on the table and pay our rents and mortgages. So I'm going to start off by just saying, for those who are new in the room, Be Wise stands for be well, be informed, be safe, and be empowered. I have a very powerful belief, deep knowledge that if we have a space where people can see themselves reflected, if we can see that it's an inclusive, safe space, that we could have a lot of information shared, a lot of great tips exchanged, and a lot of networking happening. So here we are. And we have a wonderful panel of guest speakers who will all be sharing, including myself, our stories of journeying, transitioning from one job to the other, one career to another, not always related at all. And it'll be a really good eye-opener for anyone out there who's considering changing, that, you know, if you can conceive this, it is entirely possible. So I'll start by just introducing everyone by name and then giving everyone an opportunity as well to share a little bit about themselves. We have Steffi Black, who is a life and career coach and kindness and compassion advocate. We have Heather Murphy, who's a branding consultant and business development coach, as well as a clarity coach. We have Masaba Mwambu, who's a technical director, an IT and technical specialist. We have Ahmed, who is a digital marketing genius and also a web developer. All things technical is his forte as well. We have Mark Rainford, who's a public speaker, an educator, and an author. And then we have Kim Barsanti, who's a senior talent agent with Lucas Talent. So I got that all in there as quickly as possible, only a couple of stumbles. These are amazing people who are willing to be very candid. So I really appreciate if you have any questions for you to put it in the Q&A section, and I'll bring them out there for you guys. If you have something that you'd like to share with the panel or with myself or other people who are watching and listening, throw it into the chat section. Everyone will see it. If there's something very personal you want to share with one particular panelist, then throw it directly towards them. Make sure you choose chat and their name, and it'll go directly to them, and they can respond directly to you. I'd also like to call your attention to a poll that has now been launched. Feel free to fill it out. It's for anybody and everybody to throw in your opinions, and that's how we know what track to keep Be Wise on, so it's pertinent to you. So now we're going to start with Mark Rainford to tell us a little bit about himself. We were sharing a lot with each other before broadcasting here, and he was in the midst, before I so rudely interrupted, of telling us the history and his journey of transition professionally.
Wow, okay, so thank you, and welcome to everybody out there listening. I'm super happy to be with such a great panel of guests today. So sort of really quickly in terms of background, I went to university for economics and sociology, and my first initial career path was actually be a professional soccer player, and then I got injured, and that kind of put that to an end very quickly. And when we moved from Jamaica, I was 7, and I had an interaction with a police officer when I was about 9 or 10. What happened was my mom flagged down the police car, believing it was a taxi back in the day where they were yellow. And the officer actually thought it was really funny and decided to drive us where my mom was trying to go. And that was my first interaction with police. And at the time, I thought it was so amazing that this person didn't have to do it and did it anyway, and kind of welcomed us to the country. Fast forward now, about 20 years later, I'm 29 years old. I'm a corporate executive for a venture clothing company, and I see 2 young men at a mall with a handgun. And as I leave the mall, I happen to see the police, and I tell them what I saw. I said, hey, you know, there are 2 young men with a gun. And the officer, instead of asking me about what I saw, started to accuse me of being a drug dealer. And at the moment I was so insulted because I'm trying to help the public. I'm trying to help do something right. And I spoke to my parents about it. My dad actually said, you know, stop complaining and take action.
Mm.
And as soon as he told me to take action, the obviously the next logical choice is to not complain, but actually join. So I decided at that point that my action would be to join policing because I really believed that what I saw was somebody not doing a job the way they should. And instead of just sort of leaving myself to the mercy of this, I decided, let me go into this profession and do it the way I believe it should be done, with empathy and compassion. And so I signed up and I got in. And when I was in policing, I then saw that policing wasn't educating the public about the profession. So I realized at that point that the reason why police and the public are having these clashes is that people don't understand police well enough, and the police aren't doing a good enough job educating. So I ended up leaving policing, and I am now at an organization that does exactly that. I go around the province and I educate high-risk youth about policing so that way they understand their rights, they're more comfortable talking with police, and they can build a more positive relationship. So that's where I am currently. And as I mentioned to Kata, in light of all the things going on in policing now, I realized that it's time for me to go back into policing for the same reason I went the first time around, is that there's systemic issues that are not being addressed, where as a profession, they need people that genuinely love and care for human beings. So now my sort of next chapter will be to go back to policing and try to pick up where I left off. So that's a little bit about my transitions as they're occurring. So.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing very candidly your journey and your story. That's pertinent to a lot that's going on right now. More, not only with career transition, but with regards to what's happening between police and community, and just the whole system and communities and society. There's a huge change afoot. So I really appreciate what you're doing, what you're sharing. I want to double introduce Heather Murphy, whose name I had not mentioned at the beginning, but I will double mention now because this is one powerful lady. And the work that she does now is something that I benefit from in a tremendous way. So I'm very pleased and honored to have her here to share the journey that brought her to the position where I now interact with her on the regular. So Heather, if you'd share a little bit more about your story.
Thanks, Kata. First of all, the thing that's really heavy on my heart right now in context of this webinar is being laid off and how scary and terrifying that feels. And I know firsthand because my company was born out of being laid off. So to rewind, I owned my first business at 15. I paid my way through university as a manager of a hotel and slinging jewelry on makeup on the side. And my dad had told me that I should be a teacher's secretary or a nurse, and I wanted to be a painter, and my brother should be lawyers and doctors. So right from the beginning, there was this kind of rebellious nature inside of me, but I still listened to my dad, and I finished my teaching degree, and then I found myself pregnant at the end of it. And I didn't want to work for a teacher's wage with a little child, so I decided to stay home and do small jobs to help make ends meet, and I had 3 more kids in 3 years. So in that time, I taught myself graphic design and website development, and I studied marketing, and I got obsessed with Mad Men. So I talked my way into a job at a marketing agency, and a year later, when the price of oil changed, we lost a lot of clients, and I was the 5th to get laid off. And so in that time, getting laid off, I felt like such a failure, and I knew that I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom anymore. You know, like I didn't want to watch my kids. I wanted to at least earn the price of daycare. So I had a big piece of bristle board, and a girlfriend bought me a bottle of wine called Screw It. And we just brainstormed all the things we hated about modern marketing. Like there was nothing for small businesses. Small businesses weren't being seen. They were being encouraged to fall into boxes that they didn't fit in. And I wanted to just see people. And we wrote authentically across that piece of bristle board. And to appease my husband at the time, I applied for about 20 different jobs, and the only callback I got was for freelancing. And I had 3 other people approach me to build their websites in that time. So first month I met my income, and by the end of the first year I had doubled it. So it can work out, you know, it can work out for you. I also was able to access a program because I was laid off through the government, where I got business training that they didn't tell anybody about. You had to ask specifically for that. And I remember how, you know, you get that imposter syndrome when you're starting a business, or when you do anything big in life that is a little bit terrifying. And I was sitting in my 70s basement with my wood panel walls and my red tile carpet, and they just laid down on my floor and imagined where I'd be in 5 years. And I saw myself on a stage sharing with women how to change their lives. And that totally was a pivot in my mind, because it wasn't just website development I was doing. I have a message to share, and that teaching degree has paid off in other ways, where I understand how the brain digests information, and where I can convey information to other adults on how to grow. So seeing myself as a speaker, I started to share great content. I got recognized by the Forbes Coaches Council, and I have a page on Forbes, and things just took off, and I was able to get my 3 children out of a dangerous situation. So I just want to encourage you that if you are laid off, there is hope, and there are programs, and to think big.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Heather. Thank you. I'll now turn the floor over to Kim Barsante. And while she's talking, I'm just going to share a link as well, because they've got really good things going on over at Lucas Talent. So please take the floor, Kim.
I got that in there just in time, didn't I, Kate?
Oh, yes, you did.
I'm last minute mama. What can I say? What can I say? So I started my career not as a police officer, which I thought I was going to be when I was finishing grade 12, which gives you an idea of my age, because we still had grade 13 back then. Did not become a police officer, got the theater bug shortly after, during grade 13, I guess it was. Went off, became a stage manager in theater, transitioned into stage managing for dance, which I loved working in dance. Worked with, you know, all the big ballerinas, Evelyn Hart and Karen Kane. It was really great. I loved doing it.
Wow.
It was very hard to make a living as a stage manager, because you would go from gig to gig to gig, and you're self-employed. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity to do more unless you worked in one specific theater, but that was hard to come by. It was also the time when Phantom and Cats and all of those large productions were touring, and it would have meant leaving my newly established home in Vancouver, and I decided it was about quality of life, not quantity of money, and Vancouver was certainly more in line with my quality of life. I then, while stage managing a small theatrical show, a friend who used to be an agent approached me and said, "Hey, why don't you come and work with me as a talent agent?" And I was like, "No, talent agents and agents are like lawyers, and they're slimy, and I don't want to do that. And that's not me." And so I went and met with them, and he offered me, like, you know, $500 a week or something. And I was just like, wow, like I can keep working. I mean, I was making, you know, $1,000 a week in my jobs, but you'd only do it for, you know, 6 weeks, and then you'd be unemployed for another 6 weeks. So, you know, self-employed wasn't necessarily the way to go within theater, and certainly in dance. And there's the industrials, which you made a lot of money on when those were up, but they weren't sustainable. So when he asked me to be an agent, you know, obviously the draw was an income, a regular income. For me as an assistant, I was just going to be making, you know, straight salary. Within 6 months, I took on the commercial department. Another 3 months, I took on the voice department. And then within a year, this man who sat, you know, 6 feet away from me was diagnosed and passed with a brain tumor. And literally a week before he passed, he said, "Here, take my clients. I want you to be their agent." And I was like, "No, don't want to do that. Can't, no. Okay, for you, I will," kind of thing. He was dying. You can't say no to a dying man. Come on. So I stepped in and took on his roster and took out every one of his clients individually over the course of the summer, 65 clients, and said, "Who are you? What do you want? What's important to you? What's not important to you? How can I be a good agent to you?" And basically just learned that my job was to be a partner in facilitating a transaction, basically. an actor had no access to the film and TV industry without an agent, and I needed to be the person to be that transitional liaison between them. And I thought, you know what, I can do that. It's not much different than being a stage manager. I work with the actors. I am there for them. This is what I do. So I worked with another agency for about 4 years. I left that agency for lots of reasons. Being clean and sober, there was a lot of addiction going on there, and I was like, no, can't stay. So went to another agency, stayed there for 4 years. In that process, had to leave for surgery. The person I was working with, one of the other agents who said they'd take over my roster for me while I was off having surgery, did one of those, well, I'm not going to do that therapy thing that you do while you're away. When I said therapy thing, I said, it's talking to them. You should try it. It works great. They're really happy when you do that. So I decided that was that. And within 6 weeks of my surgery, I opened up my own talent agency called W.I.S.E Artist Management, which I ran for almost 11 years. Loved having my own business for most of that time. Didn't personally make a lot of money out of it because I was constantly having to cover new agents coming in and them having to pay, not making money. And so there was a lot of financial stress running your own business, obviously. It was a successful business. It was a very well-known and respected business. But by the end of 10 years, my father became sick and passed quite suddenly of cancer. And I was traveling back and forth between Toronto and Vancouver. And I just decided I don't want to run my own business anymore. It's not what's important in my life anymore. It's again about quality of life. So I merged W.I.S.E Artist Management with Lucas Talent, along with another agency that merged as well. And we are now the second largest talent agency in Canada, and the largest in Vancouver. Some other points of note that have happened to me within this process as well is I do work part-time at Starbucks. Because I moved to a very small community on the Sunshine Coast, I realized that I didn't know my community. And being a talent agent, my hours are kind of flexible within the day. So I started working at Starbucks about 10 to 15 hours a week mornings. And for me, who normally doesn't get up till noon, for me to be at work at 6:30 or 7 in the morning to work for a 4-hour shift was pretty amazing. I call it my happy place. I love going there. I love talking to people. I love meeting my community. I love finding out what people do. I'm the person in the world who connects people together. That's kind of one of the things I do. So, if there's a realtor who I've met and somebody looking for a house, I connect, that kind of stuff. Also last year, for a 6-month stint, I worked as an interim executive director at the Sunshine Coast Hospice Society. So while I was agenting and sort of working a little bit still at Starbucks, I was working as the executive director of the hospice here, which was mostly about, for me, gathering a database of supporters, business-wise within the coast, and trying to set up some systems for them. By the end of 6 months, I was like, nah, I'm not coming back. I'm done. And they've recently hired somebody, and it's great. And I'm still working with them. So yeah, that's kind of me. I'm still an agent. There is a lot of fear around COVID because we don't know when we're starting back up again. There's a lot of protocols that have to be put into place for auditions, for being on set, for doing additional dialogue replacement afterwards in post-production. So I think that we're going to see some big changes, and nobody's really sure what's happening yet. But I can say that I've jumped from having 5 emails when I first wake up in the morning to 50 emails when I first wake up in the morning. So clearly things are starting to wind back up again, but there's no money coming in, shall we say. So I have been luckily qualified for CERB as a self-employed person, which I'm about to use my 4th and final cycle. So that's disheartening and a little bit scary as a self-employed person, but I just have to trust that something will come and that it will continue on. And if not, I'll just do a garage sale. That's it. No, I've applied for a loan to the bank to see if I can carry through on that. But yeah, it's a scary time. It's a scary time being self-employed, certainly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing
Thanks,
that.
Kate.
Yeah. And for bringing up CERB, because that's something that's definitely a very real, ominous thing right now, being the 4th and last. for people who are self-employed, for people who've qualified for it. There's been a lot of, conflict and argument, even with regards to help from the government and, who's
Yeah.
qualifying and who's not, and people who are on unemployment as opposed to CERB. So lots there. Again, if you guys have questions, not to say that anyone on here may have answers, we may not, we may just share what we're going through so that you know that you're not alone. So please feel free to throw something in the Q&A or throw something in the chat if you feel moved. Thanks again, Kim, for sharing.
One more thing I didn't put in there is with Lucas Talent, in response to Black Lives Matter, we do have Lucas Lounge, which happens on Instagram every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. This next Instagram coming up will feature the amazing Miranda Edwards, sister to Kate Edwards there. And she will be discussing kind of with another young actor named Jesse Reed. They're going to be discussing their experiences as an actor in the industry through the eyes of through the lens the lens of a Black person, through the lens of and sharing their experience on that. So I believe you've just posted that, Kate, the link. It's the Instagram link for Lucas Lounge, and the Lucas Talent Inc., I believe, is the post. So please feel free to join us to find out about kind of their experiences within the industry. It would be lovely.
Jesse,
thanks,
chat. You're welcome. I am just putting an additional note in there so people know what that link is about. Okay, so thank you again for that. And especially when it comes to spaces that allow for the candid conversation that needs to happen in a safe way that we all feel okay about talking our truth. I love that. And I appreciate Lucas Talent for that. And you, Kim.
Thank you.
So let's move on to Amin. Amin, please share your journey of transition.
Thank you, Kata. Yeah. Thanks, Kate. I'll try to keep this brief so you can start the timer now. Go.
Absolutely.
So my journey is a bit unique. My background is in electrical engineering through the University of Alberta. And when I graduated, I was so excited to work in the telecom industry because that was, the hottest thing, that you could go and design the chips that go inside these cell phones. And right when I graduated, that industry collapsed, and the biggest company pretty much in Canada that was running hardware design for telecom went bankrupt and shut down. And so my natural progression was living in Alberta was to go to Fort McMurray and live and work there as an electrical engineer in the field. And it was actually quite interesting because I was around a lot of characters, if you want to call them that, some really interesting people that work up there. And you make a lot of money up in Fort McMurray, so it's often referred to as Fort McMoney. And I liked that aspect of it. I did not like the lifestyle of it. You're working 12-hour days every single day for 20 days straight, and not eating the healthiest. And so I decided that really wasn't for me. Came back. The reason I came back to Edmonton actually was because of 2 car accidents on the highway leading to Fort McMurray and back. And that's referred to as the highway of death. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a dangerous highway, and people drive about 140 or 160 on a 2-lane highway and pass on shoulders. It can be very unsafe. Now, I was driving with a friend back down to Edmonton, and we were almost at Edmonton, about 15, 20 minutes away, and a deer ran out in front of the road. And so a friend of mine who was driving slammed on his brakes. We were, of course, going 140 kilometers an hour, and the car ended up sliding parallel to the road, ended up going off to the other side of the road, flipped about 5 times into a farmer's field, and then eventually landed upright. So if you ever want a super safe car, get a Toyota, because we came out there with, no scratches. It was quite amazing, actually. And one really quick story about, a side story about that is that as soon as we landed, the car landed upright, and we got out, we opened the doors and we got out of the car. Within 30 seconds, there was an ambulance there. And we had no idea where that ambulance came from. We were looking around wondering, like, okay, this is great. They just happened to be driving by, and they saw us standing on the side of the road. And then 10 minutes later, the actual ambulance that somebody had called for arrived. So that was, that was one of the mysteries of the universe. And I think that's great. Mm-hmm. So I came back to Edmonton, and I went to my boss's office at the engineering company, and I said, I'm not really digging this. I'd like to leave, and I'm going to quit, but I'd like to hire you back on as a client of mine. And to my surprise, they said, yeah, absolutely. So that was my intro to entrepreneurship. At that time, nobody told me that entrepreneurship meant working twice the number of hours for half the pay. And that was that was one of my reality checks. But over time, I've learned how to build systems and how to take myself away from being a freelancer and you know, just a person that just does the work into a business owner and a leader. So super excited to share my journey and maybe some insights on how I got to becoming the founder and creating Wellness Digital Marketing, where I help wellness and health and fitness entrepreneurs with their online marketing. So really cool. Excited to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So much, Amin. Another fabulous story. You know, some of the stuff, you guys, I didn't even know. I'm just getting revelations here from people. So it's amazing. It's amazing what we have to share in this space. Thank you. And Masaba, please, if you take the floor.
Hi everyone. I would say my professional career has taken a few twists and turns along the way. I graduated in graphic design from a college somewhere here, and my first job was working for Salvation Army, running a sign shop, which I did for quite a few years. The primary responsibility was teaching folks, if they so wanted, how to basically keep the alcoholics something to do during the day, because they're there for 6 months, and you know, idle hands are not the best. So I did that for quite a few years, and got an opportunity to go to Uganda to help a business start, and that was going to be in the print industry. So I got there and I realized very quickly that I had been slightly misled, but I'd promised myself that whatever happened, I would stay there for a few years before I came back to Canada. So I needed something to do. I ended up with a job at doing graphic design for a TV station there. And I got into tech quite by accident. There was one day, all the presenters decided to go on strike. And so it was both a TV and a radio station. So all the presenters went on strike, and they had no one there. So I said, oh, okay, I'll help you guys out. So I made sure the radio was running music, and I did all the editing for the radio. And so I ended up doing more technical things, just learning on the fly as we went along. And then when I eventually came back to Canada, I worked for a company that sold nonlinear editing equipment. So I learned more technical things, and ended up finally at a broadcaster where I worked for about 15 years in the engineering department. And then one day I was called into the VP's office and said, okay, you know, we're giving you new opportunities. I call it new opportunities. And so after, you know, when one gets laid off, there's so many emotions that goes through one's mind. And I think the hardest thing was waking up in the morning when you're used to a routine and going, oh, I'm not going to go jump onto the GO train or the TTC or whatever mode of transportation it is. And that routine, and so you have a reality check, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. So, so all in all through these different twists and turns in the road, you know, I call them opportunities, because you won't get to be where you are today without those twists and turns. So I look forward to sharing more about that.
Thank you so much. And what I also appreciate about what you shared is, you know, when COVID first began, the quarantines, that idle hands comment was something a lot of people were feeling. It's like, what do I do now? Like, you know, and I would say, you know, jokingly, but I was serious, that we're going to look back at this time when we are not doing anything and wish that we had it again, because it's a moment of stillness and an opportunity to create and recreate and plan and look into the unknown and decide, choose what we want to be there. One of the things that I appreciate of anyone who's recovering from whatever we each got in life, whatever addiction, whatever propensity, is that it's an opportunity to reassess. It's an opportunity to decide, to choose, and to understand how much power we actually have within our own lives. And so I appreciate that idle hands comment, because it brings to my attention the fact that, that idle hands get up to no good thing. Idle hands have plenty opportunities to do lots of good. And that's what we're talking about today. So that brings us to Steffi and myself. Steffi, which one should go first, do you think?
Oh, whatever you want,
Okay.
Kata. Whatever you go for it. You're on a flow.
No, you take it. You take it, please.
Well, can I address some of the stories that people talked about?
Absolutely.
Heather and the visualization, Kim and loss, Amin and car accident. When the universe gives us the biggest challenges, it also often gives us the biggest opportunities. It is through pain, sometimes even trauma, that we regroup and realize how resilient we are. And no longer is one job going to fit all of us. It's just not that way anymore. As you heard in these stories, we've moved careers many times. And I think it's so important to listen to that inner voice. Kim talked about holding two jobs, right? We're going to see more of this, of people doing a couple of different jobs. And I think that we have to be open to this corporate 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 isn't the way it is anymore. And the more we can go inward, and you talked about Kata resiliency, and the more we can listen to our creative intelligence through meditation, through connection with nature, and through moving through sadness, because this is a sad time for so many people. There is trauma, there is anger, there is so much going on. And if we can touch what's in us, that inner child or that wounded person, and make a plan slowly towards what could be, then the possibilities are ours. It doesn't mean that it's not difficult. And I'm a big believer in having a plan through transition. And there's going to be times where we have money and where we have none. And I think financial wellness has got to be the next stage too. For those of us that are in the gig economy, not everybody makes good money. But if we can learn to simplify and have a clear plan for how we move ahead, we can feel grounded and centered. So I thought I would address that instead of my story. I've had many careers, but for me as a life and career coach, I like to have people tell their story and help them find the next chapter authentically. It no longer looks the same, and I don't want it for my children to be the same. We are interconnected, and human beings were too individualistic before, and now we're seeing all the pain and realizing that we really are, like nature, interconnected. So let's work together to make it better for everybody at their jobs and in their lives. It doesn't matter what you do, it matters who you are. So I just wanted to address that because I got to hear these wonderful stories shared today by Kim, Amin, Heather, Mark, Masaba, and Kata, now you. And I just want to say, know thyself, right? And move towards your authentic path. It's different for everybody.
Thank you so much for that,
Absolutely.
Steffi. And as such a fabulous compassion and kindness advocate, again, you nailed it. Just seeing everybody and acknowledging everyone. I'll quickly recount my story, and it's very fresh, actually. I've quit after a 27-year career in policing. I was a colleague with Mark Rainford at Toronto Police. Funny enough, when I was very young, my intention was actually to go into law, because as an adult survivor of sexual and physical trauma, back then that was my way of wanting to advocate, because I didn't feel seen and advocated for. I didn't feel safe, so I wanted to save people. Now, I wasn't able to pay my way through law school, so I had to work. And in order to work, I had to qualify. So I learned from my mom, you learn to type. And I learned that, you get yourself into school. So I got myself I worked a whole mess of jobs, fair weather, retail, whatever, fitness clubs, whatever, did it. And got myself into Seneca for a paralegal program so that I can get myself into a legal profession that would expose me so that I can get into university from the money that I could go to law school. It makes sense when you're doing it, right? So anyway, during school, we got into the courts so that we can see courts in session. And these two court officers nabbed me and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to finish this course so I can make some money so I can go pay for school. And they're like, well, you can get a job in the legal profession somewhere and make money and then go to school. And I said, well, who's hiring? And they said, the police. I said, okay, that sounds good. So I applied. And yeah, O.I.S.E did that twice, kind of. I did that before I went and I did all that work. But I finally made my way to Toronto Police, and it was as a court officer. And while I was there, I encountered a lot of people who were in the cells that would tell me stories that, you know, similar to you, Mark, they sucked. The stories sucked. And they often sucked because of the officers that were being encountered. Not all of them. There were some great stories. There were people that would take ownership and say, look, you know what, I did whatever. And, you know, the officer was great. It's just, I did this, right? But there were way too many, for me, stories of just really tough, hard, awful situations. So I decided, like you, Mark, that that's where I was going to be. That's where I wanted to be. I forgot about the lawyer thing for a minute, and I decided I was going to be the cop thing. And so I did that. And about 10 years later, I was like, oh yeah, the lawyer thing. So I did my LSATs, and I was pregnant at the time. Got myself into law school over on the East Coast, Dalhousie, Weldon Law. And yeah, and had my son out there with me, supported by my family at the time. And no, my family at that time, they supported me very well, and realized that it wasn't that wasn't what was supposed to be happening. I was with Toronto Police for about 10 years at that point, and it was kind of a all or nothing. I had to decide to pull out and just stay basically below poverty level when I was going to school, and continue, or go back to work and feed myself and my baby. He was also very sick. He was asthmatic at the time. So I decided to pull out of law school, come back to work, and didn't look back until about maybe 10 years later, something about 10 years. So 20 years in, I was like, I love my job. I loved what I was doing. I was involved in community work for that time, probably about 25 years, but it didn't feel right. There was something going on with me. Going into work, it felt like I'm somewhere where I wasn't supposed to be. And I had a bit of a crisis. I was kind of like, what's the point? I feel like I'm doing okay, but not enough. And that's when a really good friend of mine at the time just let me know that, you know, sometimes when we feel that way, it's not about just pulling up. It's not just about quitting. It's about really just offering yourself some stillness to get some clarity. And what I realized was that the police work that I was doing, the environment that I was in, was like a nourishment, and nourishment in finances, because it's a good job, but it was also exposure to situations that I wouldn't have had access to had I not been policing. And it was a preparation ground. The level of humility that I gained from that job, the level of exposure to realities that I would not have encountered had I not been in that job, the eye openers, the empathy, the calls to empathy, the ability to influence someone's life in a way that is so powerful, in a positive way, again, humbled me so greatly. But it also let me know that there's a lot of trauma in this world. And I already told you, I got a history. So I was getting triggered a lot on the job too. But fortunately, I was doing a lot of work, a lot of holistic work off the job as well. Lots of stuff, insane. You say insane, Kim, I get it. It's like, always got something going on. And so I realized that I got my answer. My answer was the policing was a phase for me. It wasn't the end. What I was meant to do was outside of that, but contributed to by policing. And when I realized that, the job took on a whole new meaning for me. I didn't have to leave at that time. This was a little while ago. Every day that I went to work became an opportunity for me, a learning opportunity, a resource opportunity, and an opportunity to look at things from different perspectives. It became harvest time. It was my playground. And so many of the things that before that I was really intolerant of things that I felt were wrong with the system, things that I felt were wrong with, inside the organization or outside the organization and communities. It really flipped the script for me, and everything became an opportunity. So when you talk about, Steffi, trauma, I talk about trauma in that same way. Trauma has something in it as long as we can live through it. And that's the key, because not all of us get to live through our traumatic incidents, tragically enough. But those of us that do live through it, there's always an opportunity to do something with the fortitude that's been forged through the trauma. And what I witnessed through my job in policing allowed me the insight on a professional to add to my personal traumatic experiences in order to create what we now call True to Soul, a space that sees people in a non-judgmental way, in a safe way, creates a space to allow people to come, heal, to work, and to play. And it's important for me because too often in the almost 27 years that I was on that job, and too often as a child in spaces that I had no control over, we don't feel safe. We don't feel seen. We don't feel heard. And this space, True to Soul, and other spaces out there that are signified by these speakers that you see in front of you, the reason why I asked them to this space is because they have forged the same thing within their various industries. A safe space to be seen, to be heard, and to learn who we are and what we have to offer to this world, because each of us have something very unique. And sometimes when we feel like our voice is not being heard and we can't get our purpose done in the space that we're in, we feel like we can't get things done. That's what you need to look at. If you're feeling like you need a change, you need to quit, you've been fired, you've been laid off, you're about to retire, and you're just looking, you're trying to figure things out, you got to go inside before you go out. You got to look with clarity at what it is that makes you buzzed, that keeps you passionate, that makes you feel purposed. And then you formulate it into something that will make you money, will get you through life, will help you contribute to other people. Use your gifts. So that's my story. Yeah, retired. Now I'm a businesswoman. Well, I was before I quit, but now that's all I got, and I gotta, make it work. So that's me. I have, okay. So I have a note here from the floor, but before I get to the note, what I'm gonna do is ask a question. This question is to Steffi first, because it has to do with the inner game, the inside game, which is so key. A lot of times when people are looking to either move to another career or choose a career, because we may have someone in the audience who's not even in the game yet. They're looking to land somewhere. And sometimes going to a counselor to figure out what do I do is not always, it doesn't always work. And in this time where there's a huge paradigm shift with regards to our workplace, it's even more so not adequate just to go to someone and have them give you a sheet of paper and say, fill in these boxes, and what comes out at the end is what you do. So what would you suggest for that person looking to transition, looking to enter into the workforce during this post-COVID time?
Well, Kata, thank you for your story. That was a great share for people also to move through difficult times, right? And listen to follow their passions when they can, right? So thank you. In terms of moving forward out of COVID and moving ahead at any time, I'm a big believer in a plan, because it can feel disorientating when we are in between jobs, when we've been laid off, when jobs aren't out there as much as they've used to be. And I feel like a simple plan that encourages self-compassion in your day, daily rituals, and networking and social connectivity. So when I work with clients as a life and career coach, we always put together a plan, because consistency leads to mastery. And what you put, as we've all heard, what you put your energy on expands. So if you are networking, don't think of it as networking, think of it as paying it forward. for the rest of our lives, we won't be in one job. So whoever you connected to in that first job out of school, I hope you nurture those connections and keep in touch with them. And I hope you are great to your community, because we can all help each other. And a lot of the jobs that happen for my clients and for people out there are from the connections. I used to have a virtual women's networking group, and we would meet once a year, and otherwise I'd send out virtual updates on jobs that were out there. Plan rituals of self-care, connectivity, and instead of networking, paying it forward. And let's be authentic. It's a tough time. So I want to hear that, you know what, I'm having a tough time. Do you know anybody that is in this industry? And the old way was, do you mind helping me? You know, do you know someone? You know what? We're all suffering right now. The more authentic you are, the more people want to help. And if we can come out of this time with more authenticity and honesty, we are all better for it. So to recap, that plan that also includes self-compassion in your day as you re-enter the workforce. And does that give you a sort of a base? It's a small little tip, but I'm a huge believer in a daily plan when you are looking for a job.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Steffi. You know, we're not always socialized to pay attention to that. And I love your messages, because you make that a fundamental piece to professional and personal development, is self-compassion. And we kind of really have to reconstruct that ourselves in a time when we're always supposed to be like looking out to other people, taking care of other people, taking care of other things. And that brings me to Mark, because I feel like a key piece of your journey in making that decision that you made, because choosing to leave a job that is perceived to be like, you got it good, like, why are you leaving though? Especially around this time, are you crazy? There's a lot around that. And if you could speak to your journey in making that decision and the things that surrounded that at the time in the external world, I'd love that. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, when I left, I had a lot of personal traumas going on, and I had to make a decision for my life and for the quality of living that I wanted. And the interesting thing was, one of the things that I went through when we talk about stillness is that all the traumas that were happening in my life through other people, I started to sort of turn them to be signals towards me rather than these things that are happening to other people. I tried to connect them all together and say, okay, if I take all these random traumatic events and put myself at the center of them, how do they connect? What is the message that I could take from all of them? And what ended up happening was, I looked at it as, through my thinking, the different traumas that were happening had connections to different parts of my life. So I had, you know, childhood friends that died by suicide. I had things happening to, you know, family members. And these things were getting closer and closer to my identity of self. And then I decided, let me look at who I am at the moment, at that time, as a person. And what I came to recognize was, as much as I was passionate about policing, I didn't wall myself off from policing. I allowed my professional identity to overtake me. So I was unable to hang up the police identity and come home. I became this person that was 24 hours a day, I was a police officer. The phone would ring, I'd do community things. I never gave myself any separation. And I then sort of looked at it and I said, okay, what does the Bible tell me about this? I said, that's a false idol. I've now elevated this police identity to be bigger than myself and bigger than my personal beliefs, bigger than my spiritual ground, and bigger than everything. And so at the time, I then said to myself, what if you just quit? And as soon as I asked myself the question, I could feel the stress just leave. Like, it was instantaneous. And the next thought was, okay, I feel really good, which means you are totally insane right now, because this is why you feel so good. You must be mad to feel a simple decision like that makes you so free. You have completely lost your mind. And I gave it thought. I went and saw my mom. My mom was in the hospital at the time, and they had given her like less than a week to live. So I went to her and I said, listen, Mom, I'm leaving policing. I'm going to be here by your side until whatever happens. She ended up living. They ended up finding a tumor. She's alive and well. She's doing great. And my mom just looked at me and she said, okay, if you think that's what you need to do, do it. And I thought, man, this is getting easier and easier to leave this job. There are no barriers, right? And I left, and in leaving, my mom's health returned, my own health improved, like all the little markers that I had asked the world, the universe to tell me were coming back. And I went, oh, okay. So it was the false idol. And then in light of all the things that are going on, so I had started thinking about policing again because I was doing the education piece, and I realized that all the police officers I was working with across the province, they were pleasantly surprised at how easily they could get along with high-risk youth when we created a space for them to interact. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, okay, I can't spread myself too thin across the province. But what if I centralize myself to one service, one division? What if I work in one community and do the same thing over and over and over again with thousands of kids, tens of thousands of people? What if I just commit to being this one guy in this one neighborhood and see what ripple effects will come? And then when all this stuff started happening, all the recent sort of turmoil, I realized then, I was like, you know what? The universe is now telling me something again. And what I realized this time was the level of humility that is required for me to go and reapply, because as Kata will tell you, there are going to be a lot of people that when I go back, they're going to kind of be like, oh, so you thought you were better than the job, you left, you thought you could do something else. And returning is kind of their way of saying, you know what, I told you so. You shouldn't have left. But I know going back, it's not about me. So the whatever sort of opinions people might have, I know I'm going back for the right reason. And the reason is to help people heal, to inspire, to hopefully recruit, right? To be able to show people in the community that the thing you're most afraid of actually needs you. It needs your compassion, your kindness. If we want to change the police services, we need kind, compassionate people to stand in the place of those who think the job is about catching bad guys, right? The more compassionate people we encourage to go into it, that is how we change policing. Is we get all these panelists that are here right now, if we could recruit you all and scatter you throughout police services, we have the kind of people we've always dreamt of. So when Kata left, it's a void. It's going to be hard to find another Kata, right? So that's sort of where, right? I'm in this place of saying, you know what, like I can go and help, right? I can go and help people and have this new insight and serve, right? Be a server, right?
When you told me that you were going back, you made me the happiest person ever. And I have to tell you, in answer to what you're saying about it being tough going back, I know that.
Yeah.
You know, I hear it.
Yeah.
Trust me. Trust me. I think the balance, because everything's a balance and contrast, right? There are going to be so many people on there that are going to be like, Mark's coming back? Because there are so many people that said, Mark left? What? So those people are going to be really happy, Mark. I can't express to you. People inside, people outside. It's the butterfly effect, right? There are going to be a lot of ripple effects from you doing your work, and all the like-minded people who do exist in there, who are doing what we're doing what they're doing, shining brightly. But sometimes we just don't see it, right? Because it's the negative stuff that gets most of the attention. They will be grateful for you and for the active recruiting that you will do, because they'll know that you have the insight to look for the right people, to speak to the right people, to bring the education in and out of the service. So I'm glad you're going back. I'm really glad. And I have comments from the floor and questions that I want to get out there before we move on. So, Sam Miller to everyone, but Mark, you are returning with a spirit of kindness and understanding that is exactly what is needed. Your timing is perfect.
You're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And from Cindy, you'll be such a valuable asset to the police department, the community. Mark, best of success.
Thank you.
Wow. Look at those signs, Mark. Wow.
And so here we have a couple of questions. Thank you so much, Mark. From an anonymous attendee, what if you are really relying on outside confirmation that your decision to make a change is right? No gut feeling about it. It's just a big risk to take. I have kids. Did anybody want to speak to that?
You said it, Kata. There is clarity in stillness. So to this lovely person who said that question, if I'm answering it correctly in my understanding, is go to your creative intelligence. Don't listen to just the outside. If you can, there is beauty in going still and listening to yourself and writing out the pros and cons and seeing where you're drawn. Heather talked about lying on the floor and visualizing where she could be. I don't know, Heather, if you want to address that too, but go inward. Listen to that gut, just like Mark is in going back to the police force.
I think sometimes we're forced into things or we fall into things and then sometimes we choose them. A lot of things in my life have been kind of forced into, and so I have to choose right away, okay, how do I turn this into money? But I think if you have the luxury of some security and job security, it's a good idea to make sure that you have some savings. It's a good idea to look into if there's any funding available to you or grants to kind of create a little bit of safety. But if you don't have safety, then you just have to hit the ground running, right? You don't have a choice. Like for me, that's how I started my business. And also that's how I left my marriage, right? I didn't have a choice. So I have to put milk in the fridge. So how am I going to create boundaries to shape my skill set into dollars? Like how am I going to convert this thing that I can do into dollars and still be able to sit on the deck with my kids in the evening? Right. So boundaries and some pivots, and sometimes you need to find really good connections and people that can reflect back to you things that they see that you can't see. There's certain things that I'm really good at that I would have no idea without people like Kata to reflect back at me. But surrounding yourself with a really good circle of influence and friends. And like I hang out with friends who are millionaires because that's where I'm headed, right? Like that's where I want to be. Don't think small and don't hang out with people that are going to keep you small.
Yeah. Those are beautiful points. The thing that I call people like bumbly mumblies, you know, the naysayers that they're always looking for something wrong. They're like under the guise of helping you, they're going to critique the crap out of what you're thinking or what you're doing. And so the thing about people who do that is that we can look at them as kind of like some isolated incidents, or they're just this, they're just that. Oftentimes the reason why it hurts so badly is they may be articulating doubts that we carry inside of our hearts, inside of our minds. And that is what the pain is coming from, is that there's still something in us that is hesitating, that is doubting, that doesn't have confidence, doesn't trust ourselves. So at the same time as you definitely keep naysayers and bumbly mumblies, like Heather was saying, on your outer circles of influence, think of circles of influence. Your innermost sanctum is yourself, your heart, your head, your spirit, and, a higher power that you choose to believe in and know and find comfort in. The next level are those people that you really trust, that you tell you like your nastiest secrets and know that it'll go nowhere. You just like trust them like anybody. That's your next your next circle. And then it keeps going outward. Do not have naysayers and bumbly mumblies in your innermost sanctum. And the reason why is because that's where you dream, that's where you envision, that's where you're most vulnerable. And if you have naysayers in there, it's really tough to get anything off the ground. So, yeah, exactly. Roll out of bed. It's like, I'll just get back into bed, right? So you really want to, like Heather and Stephanie, everyone's talking about, you surround yourself with people that you trust and that you know see your vision even before it even has come to fruition. The people in my inner sanctums are the ones that I didn't have to prove anything to them as I started to develop. They felt the energy of my passion. They could almost taste it, though they couldn't see anything. And because of that, and because they loved me, they support me. Those people get to be in the inner sanctum. Those are the people that I bounce things off of. Those are the people that I vet things through, because I know that their feedback comes with objectivity. It comes with love. It's done with good intention. So that's one thing. But the other piece is also just to understand that I've done single parenting. I did it for a good while before I met my wonderful husband, Masaba, right? And we did it together, we blended. During those years, especially when I went off to law school, like I said, it was below poverty line. I had to decide between gas and or feeding myself or my child or having hydro. You know, those are tough decisions to make. And so in light of that kind of survival kicking in, we still do it, don't we? Think about the most dire circumstances that you've encountered and how you got through it. The fact is, you got through it. You found the resiliency, you found the innovation to make it work. Things that you would never have thought of doing before, things that you would never even deem like worthy of you doing. All of a sudden, it became feasible when you're caught up against the wall. So that question there, when it comes to no gut feeling, the thing about our gut feeling, it's always there. It's just got stuff layered over it, right? So that stillness will allow you some access to know what is right. And you got to trust yourself. You got to build trust in yourself and look for the positive reinforcement outside of yourself in people. So yeah, well answered that first question. Great question. Thank you for it. And it looks like these questions are being answered as we go along, but I'm just going to read them out because I want people out there to understand that the questions that they have are being shared by other people. So unfortunately, COVID situation has eaten into my little bit of savings that would have given me somewhat of a push start. Is it me, or is groceries more expensive? It's more expensive in some areas, including the fact that I have given to family in need during this time. My current work environment is causing a negative effect. I don't want to leave. I need to leave. But I find the exhaustion of doing it all is causing a negative effect. Your question of financial stability is so on point, and the reason I am staying with my current job. I feel like I've been building it on the side for years now. How long is too long to get started? I'm stuck in that mode. And Amin, I know you did respond to that. If you or anyone else wants to just take a few seconds on that one again, please. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't respond on text. I wanted to respond on the video here. So just a subtle shift in the way you think about it. Thank you for submitting that question. It's a great question. I think a lot of people have that feeling that they really dislike their current situation, their job, they're not happy with it. And I was in that position as well. Like I mentioned, I was working up in Fort McMurray, very toxic environment, lots of people there, and there's a lot of greed. And one thing I realized, and this is something over the past 10 years, which is really solidified in my mind, is that if you change your mindset and think about your situation, and let's say you've got a job that you don't like, but you don't have another choice. If you think about it as I have to go to work, or I have to do this, then it becomes difficult and challenging. But if you think about it as I get to do this, then that changes the way that you think about it, right? So I have to do this versus I get to do this. And it makes it a little bit easier when you do that. Now, the other thing also I want to bring up is that the person said that how long is too long to get started? So I would say to that you already have started, right? So congratulations on that. That's a huge step for somebody to take that leap and to actually start. Now the trick is to just keep going every day, just a little bit at a time, but to just keep going. And think about it as your average speed, not your acceleration, because with acceleration, you burn out. You just spend days and days and days doing something and then you crash. But with average speed, you just keep going at a steady speed. And you'll find that over time that stacks on top of each other. So I hope that helps a little bit. And great question again.
There we go. Okay. Thank you for your answer, Amin. Did anybody else want to add to that? No? I have a question for you, Mark, from the audience here. I think you will be a better positive force going back. Happy to have such a positive person in the police force. That's another response. Someone actually also asked, Mark, do you feel you'll be treated differently in going back?
I think so. So I've been, in some ways, yes, I've been very active with Toronto Police since I left. So it's not like I left and I was sort of completely gone. I've done a lot of programs in Toronto with youth in custody and bringing police officers in. And I've done a lot of stuff with senior officers as well. So I think there will be some people that I think will see things differently, but I'm also very different than when I left. So, you know, it's going back for me right now. I already can envision the sense of getting out of a car and walking and seeing the communities. There's certain neighborhoods that I know going back to and seeing people in uniform is going to just surprise them. And, you know, it's going to be exciting. But I think that I don't really mind how people are going to react. Some people will be inspired. Some people, you know, their negative energy was negative before. I imagine it's going to be negative still. So it's just, they're going to be how they want to be. And that's okay, because it's still never going to be about them anyway, right? This is still going to be about, you know, doing something that I'm passionate about, doing something I love and caring about other people and trying to motivate other people to join this profession. So that's still what it's going to be about. And it's inspiring for, like, even with my daughter and my wife, and, you know, we have 2 girls, it's inspiring to be able to show them that you can change your mind, right? Like the notion of you can't ever return to something because you left. To be able to show our kids, we left, I did something else, I enjoyed it, and I want to return, it's okay, right? You know, stuff like that, to me, it matters. It matters to be able to show them, don't be afraid to try something and change your mind and try another thing and change it. That's okay, right? It doesn't matter what other people are saying. Do what feels good to you, right?
Absolutely. I feel like, you know, that's along the same continuum as this thing that we do sometimes when we take a stance on something and we don't change no matter what new information comes in. We just kind of hold tight to it sometimes. And just because we want to seem validated, we want to seem credible. And the reality is that truth is very fluid. And when it comes to what's true for us in each moment, the fact that it shifts needs to be understood, and we need to understand it more than we need to expect people to understand that. So this whole, you know, this is what I did and I'm standing by it no matter what. All that does is it creates a very difficult situation because our circumstances may change, the reality around us may change, the people around us may change, and it's no longer suitable. That perspective no longer serves. And I think that applies here, Mark, because, you know, I think each industry has this whole kind of loyalty thing, this, you know, you can't be considered effective and you can't be considered, you know, on side unless you will sacrifice everything and burn for the cause, you know, type of thing. But the reality is, and Stephanie and I, we spoke about this at the very early stages today, is that we need to put the mask on ourselves so that we can help people that we care about. And if the mask looks like leaving a job, taking a break, taking a mental wellness day, creating your own business because there's something burning in your heart and your gut to do, then that's your mask and you got to do it. What's the point of not putting on the mask? We can't help people when we're dead. We can't help people when we're a shell of who we are because we're doing something that we absolutely hate. So when we allow ourselves to look at the feasibility of that vision that's been sitting like a little nugget in our heart and our mind, it becomes possible. Just like what Mark spoke about. He said, like, he just thought about what would make him happy, and it was like, quit. He was like, what? But the more he thought about it, the more doors started opening. We don't see the doors if we don't allow the possibility in our mind. We will not see the doors. It doesn't mean that they're not there. It just means that we can't see them. You know, I fought it when I got that compulsion to, you're going to need to leave your job. I could have stayed for a few more years and not had to do anything because I'd be having, like, you know, the pension that I worked for 3 decades. So when I got that inclination years ago, I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, Mark, no, this is a good job. I'm not going anywhere. And I just kept getting these nudges because I am intuitive. I allow my gut feelings. I listen to it because it's saved me. It's what helped me survive childhood. So it's something that I listen to. And as I listened to it, doors started popping open. You know, I'm a planner. So, you know, I spoke with my partner. I said, hey, this is what I'm considering. And my partner was Masaba was very supportive. Yeah, not exactly happy. And anxiety was definitely there. It was like a what? Say what? But you know what? The doors kept opening up. People kept showing up. But that was only as I incrementally allowed the possibility to take root and bear some fruit. If I ignored it and I stifled it, then I could go on and say, like, what if? What if yeah, I'm comfortable, but I wonder what would have happened if. And that's why we're doing this webinar, is because you need to answer that question. You need to answer the calling, even if it's only to set it back down again. You got to look at it though, because if you don't, you're going to be what if till the moment that you finally pass, because we all do. There's another, let's see, note here from Phil, for Kata and Mark. You need to connect with my friend, Vanessa Leslie. She's a former OPP officer, now works in recruiting. You would thrive off her energy. Would love to introduce you to her. Okay, so I've connected with him on LinkedIn. Mark, if you want to do the same, he's put his link there. I wonder if it's still available. I'll get that to you, Mark. Okay. And thank you, Phil, very much. And Cindy, Steffi had mentioned going within, stillness and moving forward through transition, and being authentic and transparent when reaching out as we're all suffering. Kata had shared the great idea of circles of influence and recruiting people you trust when you don't trust your own counsel. Do you think people are more open and responsive to the idea of mentoring if you find yourself more isolated and perhaps between jobs and striving for connection? Did anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, you know what? I'll just speak to that really quickly. I think the thing with mentoring is that once you find your flock, like what Kate was talking about, and you share your passion of what it is you seek, as soon as you start to do that, just like Kim spoke about, which I love that Kim described herself as a connector. I think everybody on this panel, that is one of the assets that we all have, right? So I think once you get into this kind of community of people, we are the kind of people, just like Kim, the connectors that can find each other mentors, and it becomes very easy, right? Once you find your flock, because a lot of us have a Kim, or a lot of us are the Kim to other people. And so I think the first thing about the mentorship piece is you really have to be prepared to put yourself out there and talk about what it is you seek and what it is you want to be a part of, because it also is a really good way to sift through people. People that are negative, they run from this kind of energy that we have. Negative people do not want to be around us. This is too much sugar for them. They can't handle it. And for the rest of us, we can't get enough of this, right? So I think the mentorship question is seek the flock that you belong to. And before you know it, there are opportunities for mentorship that you wouldn't be able to use all the mentors that are available, right?
And to Mark's point, and Cindy's good question, is also don't be shy about forming your own board of advisors. You know, we can be unconventional. We can pick a couple people and say, listen, I'm in between jobs and it's a little scary right now. I'd like some official sounding boards. So would you mind if once a month I check in on my strategy and this is what I'm doing? And understanding that people are stretched thin, you have to make sure everybody who is doing it is willing to do it and doesn't feel stretched thin already. But I think often creating our own board of advisors, you know, when I did the women's networking group, it's because I heard so many stories of women looking for jobs. And I thought we can connect people. And I would just send out a newsletter and meet once a year. And I think if Cindy, think about your own board of advisors of picking a few people saying, I'm going to share the job search and I'll let you be my input, and making it not too time consuming for people and setting it up well. I think, yes, it is possible. Their mentorship can look different to different people, and honoring people's time and energy, you can create something that maybe can be for the rest of your life. The one woman I know who was in between jobs started a group called Stronger when she was in transition, and she basically meets people who have been in the job market for 10 years, and they connect through that 10-year capability that they will meet once a month and discuss jobs, and connections have been made because of that. So proactively maybe creating your own is also a way to go. Sometimes we wait on other people, but sometimes it's okay for us to say, I would really like a few of you to be my advisors during this time. So that's one thought to capitalize on what Mark said.
Thank you so much, Steffi. And that is a great bit of advice, as Cindy has noted here. Excellent advice, Mark. Love that idea, Steffi. It says, oh, Phil says Stronger group member here too. So.
Oh, you're kidding. You actually Stronger Gabrielle O'Rourke, Phil. That's pretty cool. Maybe you can tell Cindy about it. Maybe Cindy can connect to you on LinkedIn.
He says, yes. So thank you for that. And I do know we have gone over, and that's purposeful. I always a lot longer time than the hour, because our sessions tend to go a little over, because it's always so juicy. But you know, the suggestion of gathering the people around you, your tribe, you know, that true to soul, that's how we term it. It's a tribe, because it's more than just I don't know how many of you guys, I think everybody here has experienced networking back in the day, like, you know, the day type of networking. It's not like that anymore. It's you know, when I talk with you, I'm looking at your eyes. I'm not casing the room to see who next is coming in. And it's not to say that that doesn't still happen. It does. It's just not my bag. That's not my thing. And when it comes to knowing what your thing is, it's a great opportunity, like Steffi said, to gather that like-mindedness around you, because we're each so unique. My tribe may be different from another person's tribe, and they don't have to look the same. I mean, it's 7.5 billion different fingers on one hand. Why are we trying to be the same? Our uniqueness is actually what's so vibrant and beautiful. And if you gather people who see you around you to support you, it's the most magnificent feeling to know that you're seen and that you're heard and that you're supported. So thank you for that suggestion of creating your own board. Hey, I need help. You know, get a different person from different industries on there, you know, just everything that you need, and people that you trust and that you like and that like you, and we're good to go. We're a collective. We have, oh, Steffi, may I read your comment out?
Absolutely. I shared with Cindy and the panelists and the attendees. Absolutely.
Awesome. So love that Stronger is mentioned again. Serendipity. I have emailed her, but haven't heard back. Thank you for participating. Great to have your energy. And this is the type of thing, the reason why, especially the first part I want to read out, is that this right here is an example of what comes when we just talk out loud. And we've been socialized in such a way that it's like you hold the secrets close. You know, like if things aren't perfect, just be quiet until it is perfect. And I've grown up in that. Trust me, I'm a mule. I can froth at the mouth and just keep going, because I just grew up like that, you know, just work hard, right? But the fact is, I've learned the hard way that it's collectively that we get more done. And so if we're about transforming our lives and transforming this world, changing what George Floyd points towards, creating a space that anyone, myself, Mark, any one of us would want to go back to an industry then we got to understand that we got to do it together, and we each have a key. We have something to contribute in a very unique way. And the only way we can figure it out is by talking. And it doesn't have to be major things, but just little conversations that we're willing to be authentic in can go a long, long way. It's a butterfly effect, y'all. So Cindy says, excellent. Love how you all build on each other's knowledge and ideas. Kata and panel, these sessions are so powerful and valuable. Hashtag grateful. Thank you, Cindy.
That's
Thank you.
lovely. That's lovely.
That's our intention. So let's wrap this up with a little something, something from each guest speaker. Something that you want people to leave here just knowing and understanding about what you bring to the table and what you want them to remember. Starting with Amin, please.
All right. So I think this has been really powerful, and there's just so much that we've talked about here. We've gone through everybody's journeys and see where they started and where they ended up. And what this just reminds me, just my one comment, is that all of us are so unique. And I think we need to share that uniqueness with the rest of the world, and not sit back and think, oh, well, I don't have anything to say. You do, absolutely. So I would say, find a channel, find some friends. Social media is very helpful that way. There can be the negative sides of social media, but there are the positives. And share your story. And that would be my message to everybody here today.
Thank you so much, Amin. And he walks his talk, because we're about to relaunch our website, and he has taught me a lot, Amin, with regards to social media and how well it can be utilized to do so much good. So thank you for that. Thank you, Amin. And Kim. Oh, here.
Unmute, there we go.
There we go.
I say that I didn't realize I was supposed to be looking at the question and answers and answering them. I'm sorry, I was a little late.
Oh, don't even worry about it. Oh, no, we got it.
I wasn't aware of the format. It's okay. I got it. I answered one question. I did great. That's good. Thank you. I think for me that, I really love the part that, Mark, when you were talking also about the connectors, Steffi, I really love that you were talking about just, going in there and figuring out what you need and putting out that what I call board of directors. When I was at hospice for the short amount of time, I met with a lot of other executive directors within the community, not just in that industry, but within the community. Also, when I became an agent, I talked to other agents about what's it like to have your own business. Does it work? What's important? What's not important? I talked to accountants and money people to find out what the expenses are going to be. So I was well informed. I did that connecting with people. I think the most important thing for me, because the transition was from being a stage manager to being an agent, certainly that was a huge transition. What I decided in that process was I needed to make my mark. I needed to be that agency that cared about the actors, not just cared about the money. And I think that has a ripple effect. I think once you start being that person and that sort of behavior, it has to ripple off to the rest of the agencies, because it wasn't working. And there are still some agencies out there that are just about money, but that's not what it's about. It's about the connection between the agent and the performer, or the performer and the casting director. It's all about liaising and making connections, but you have the choice to do it in a positive way. So for me, it's always that, be the change, make your personal mark, do those kind of things. And through that process, realized I needed to open my own agency to do that the way I wanted to, right? So running my own business, but then also trusting the process that I didn't need to run my own business to continue on with my message and what I was doing. So I think there's a lot of things that, for me, it's about trusting the process, be the change, make your mark, and, stay positive no matter what happens, right? There's been lots of bumps that happen, and COVID's not ideal. Going through huge changes to help assist to dismantle systemic racism in the industry is going to be hard. How do we work with our performers to ensure that they're in a safe environment? And safe, I mean by accepting them as Black, Indigenous, and people of color on set, so they're not feeling like there's a racism, or as an Indigenous actor walking into a theater rehearsal and knowing that it's okay to bring in and smudge the space and be present in the space and bring their own culture there. So there's a lot of work to be done. You know, and I'm dedicated to that. That's something I'm going to do. I want to sit down with all of my performers, particularly who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, and say, what do you need? What do you want to stay safe? And then from there, be able to go forward and make the change to the people who do the hiring. So, you know, that's all about transition and change too, right? That's about creating a change and creating a transition. And again, trust the process and be the change. That's my two things. So
Thank you. Thank you
yeah,
very
thank
much,
you.
Kim. And yeah, it's really that key point about being able to let go of some of these pre-formulated or socialized ideals of what is actually effective. And I love the fact that you have that Lucas Lounge coming up. And you guys, that link is in the chat. Hopefully it's not too far up. I'm going to see if I could just reshare it again. So we can visit that space and see what's happening up in there, because I think that's a really profound thing to do on that level in the industry. So thank you. Thank you, Kim, for that. Let's see who we got. Masaba, what's your parting words, please? What are your parting words?
Well, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. It's okay to be apprehensive as to what tomorrow is, but don't let that stifle what you do. Truly believe in yourself and you will be fine.
Thank you. Thank you. It's direct to the
Or
point.
fake
Poignant.
it, you make it, Masala. Fake it, you make it.
True enough. True.
That's right. Nobody messes. Don't mess. And Mark, what would you like to say?
I think what I would leave with is whatever comes easy to you and fills up your cup, gives you energy, that is your skill, that is your gift, and you use that as your currency in life in everything you do. And when you do that, opportunities will present themselves, both financial, through friendship, love, you name it. But once you do the things that are easy to you, that really fill you up and bring you energy, your potential is unlimited, right? That's what I would share.
Beautiful. I couldn't agree with that more. That's my life experience. It's so true. And especially when we're taught, you know, what is it? Put your nose to the grindstone. No pain, no gain, right? So we always think it has to be hard, right? So thank you for pointing that out, that it's usually when it feels easy, when it feels, you know, deceptively just free and liberating. That's the ticket, the buzz. I really appreciate that point. Big time. Thank you. And Steffi.
Absolutely. I would leave us with call upon your resourceful past to bring in your preferred future. And one small exercise I have, because I know a lot of people are suffering, looking for a new job or financially strapped, and I don't want to pretend that's not happening, right? And address that too, is write out your ideal day. Try this for a month. Every day, either in the morning or before you go to bed, write a paragraph on your ideal day. Peaceful, purposeful, calm, tranquil, surrounded by great people, in nature, whatever feels right to you. Mark talked about what makes you feel good, what makes you flow. Write that for a month, or mail a letter to yourself of how you want your future to look, and start believing that is possible. And I'm not talking about fairy tales. I'm talking about openness and surrender. As Viktor Frankl taught us in Man's Search for Meaning, we can't always choose our circumstances and everything can be taken away from us, but our right to choose our attitude. So call upon your resourceful past for your preferred future. And I just gave a little small exercise if you want to try that for a month. So thank you. Great to hear everyone's stories today. I loved it.
Thank you so much. I love exercises. I love left brain and right brain.
Virgo.
Oh, I am so a Capricorn, though. I am so a Capricorn.
Hey, Capricorn. Sorry, Kim.
Virgo.
Thank you for that very much. And Heather, yay. Heather did have to go, and I'm so phenomenally excited that she came back, because there's a question here. I don't know if you got it, but before you sign off, or that, give your last parting words, if you wouldn't mind, if this person's still in the audience talking about this. It says, Heather, do you feel it took longer to get your business off the ground being a single parent? I am a newly separated, amicably separated parent. I find it overwhelming and stifling, juggling things around and maintaining my side business.
Well, like I said earlier, I didn't really have a choice about leaving my marriage. I also didn't really have a choice about starting my business. It just kind of happened because I had to. Is it harder? Yes, it's really hard. It's really friggin' hard. But my mom said to me, I remember one time last year, because it's not amicable in my case. My mom looked at me in the face and I was crying, like big donkey cry, I call it, when it gets real messy. And she said, when did heart ever stop you? It's not going to stop me, Sometimes you just have to let that motivation be bigger than that pain and that obstacle. And it is my core belief that a woman with access to motivation, finances, and education can do anything, and support. So if you do have a motivation, right? Your children are a huge motivation, as something bigger than just wanting to pay bills, though. When I get out of bed in the morning, it's not to pay bills. I get out of bed because I want to see women empowered in business. So, and I want to fight back to that thing that said you should be a teacher, secretary, or nurse, because I'm not any of those things. So I think you got to let that kind of rise up stronger and find support, access to finances, and education. So fill yourself with education. I listen to audiobooks constantly, and that keeps me fueled.
I love that. And I also love that as your parting words, like, when did heart ever stop you? It's almost like a red flag, like, come and get it, And I find that the people here that have, honored this space with your stories and your candor and your insights and your wisdom, all exemplify the ability to not only challenge oneself and be candid with oneself, but to get to the other side. That's how I perceive, and that's how I teach and talk about trauma, is that as long as we can survive it, when we get through it, and Steffi has pointed to this as well, there's something for us on the other side of it. Our motivation has to be very primal. Like Heather said, it's not about making money. That's one of the mistakes that our world has socialized us around, thinking that's about the bill. It's about, the paper. But it's what the paper gets us that motivates us, which is our hierarchy of needs, our shelter, our ability to eat, stay warm, self-actualize is at the top of that hierarchy of needs, to live our purpose in this world, on this planet. So when you find that passion that Mark talked about, you're getting ready to create your motivation, to be clear on what that is. Steffi shared something about, creating that perfect day. And I'm going to put into the chat here the name and website of someone who took me through that. I think it was a couple of years ago. It was very similar. Her name's W.I.S.E. But what she did, as part of her whole process, is that she asked me to think about the perfect day, what it literally looks like from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. Now, up until that point, the reason why she did that with me is because I told her, yeah, I'm quitting my job. This is 2 years ago. So I knew this a while ago. Like I said, I'm a planner. And I had done so many different things. I had my plan A, plan B, plan C. And also she asked me to go through this exercise. I'm like, okay, my day is going to look like this. But by the time I was going through the exercise, I was in it, because I'm a powerful manifester. I admit that much. When I write things into reality. I speak things into reality. When I decide, when I choose, we all have that capacity. It comes to be because I've chosen. And so I wrote my day. And as I started to get into that exercise, it fits so well for me. I wrote, okay, this is the time I'm going to get up, and this is what I'm going to do post-retirement. This is what my day is going to look like, just running my business. I am now 6 months after post quitting, retiring, whatever anyone wants to call it. You should have seen me like ripping things up, looking for that book. Where's that book? I want to get my schedule together, because I realized, oh my gosh, I'm in the reality of having done it. I did it. I'm now on the other side. And so never think that it's so impossible. If your mind can put it together, it can come to be. And that exercise that Steffi has spoken about, what W.I.S.E also does, what someone says, Kim, quality of life. That's a motivator, you know? And if we can grasp that for ourselves and not wait to be told that by anybody, that is the biggest motivation ever. I love you guys. I love you speakers for what you brought to this space. It's so profound to me. I hope this ripples all the way out there, and we'll be doing this again, because this is a new paradigm. This is the way, you know, we're going to a new paradigm of being, of working, of playing together. I want everyone to just remember, be well, be informed, be safe, and be empowered. Take care.